welcome to You Make Sense. This podcast is a manual to understanding your human experience so that you can navigate the world with freedom, ease, empowerment, and create the life that you desire. Remember, you make sense, all parts, always. Hey everyone, and Happy New Year's. I hope that you are spending time with your loved ones today, and I really hope it's also a time where you're reflecting back on 2024 with loving kindness towards yourself. So oftentimes we can think about all the things that we didn't do or didn't accomplish and be so hard on ourselves. And I really invite you today to have the intention of looking at all the things that you have done and the shifts that you've made in your life. And think about, if somebody else was in your shoes, how would you celebrate them? And can you lean into that just a little bit more today? And I'm certainly doing that with you and for you. And I'm really excited about this episode. It's actually the first episode of a 5-part series that we're doing called your Somatic Starter Kit. It is meant to support you to enter 2025 in a really different way than you've perhaps entered other years. So often, when we think about entering a new year, and this episode, by the way, is going to talk all about New Year's resolutions and why so much of the time they don't work for us and what we can do to actually change that. But a lot of times at the end of a year, the beginning of a year, we're thinking about all the things that we're deeply desiring or hoping for and the things that we're wanting to change in our lives. And it's filled with complexity because oftentimes those things that we're wanting to change are things that didn't change last year either, or the year before, or the year before. And then we can be met with this place of hopelessness, like maybe they're never going to change for me. Or we beat ourselves up and say, what's wrong with me? And why am I not making this happen? And so in this episode, I'm going to make sense of why oftentimes the way that New Year's resolutions are approached do not work and what does work instead. And in this 5-part series that I hope you join me on this journey of, it's really going to be this, think of it like a manual, or we're calling it a starter kit. So a starter kit to really help to propel you into this year in a way that is going to set you up for success in all the areas of your life that you are desiring. And of course, like every other episode, we're going to use science and research to support us in this process. So let's first talk about, why do New Year's resolutions not work so much of the time? And one of the primary reasons is because they're approached from a place of not taking into consideration the system inside of us that is keeping us from the things that we're wanting, which is our nervous system. So more often than not, the way that we think about this, or manifesting, right, is we are told to feel into or think about the thing that you're deeply desiring. So people, journal about the thing that they want, or this time of year, maybe you create a vision board for it, or you speak it out loud to people in your life. All of those things can be really beneficial. But what happens is we're thinking about a life that we might have in, 12 months from now in December, or maybe even 3 years from now, it will be, in its fullest fruition, and so on and so forth. The idea is it's not happening today. So we feel into that thing that we're desiring. We think about it. You might even feel really excited about it. But then we're left with, what in the world do I actually do? And it can feel like we're left on one side of a cliff, and there's this huge chasm in the middle. And on the other side is the thing that we're deeply desiring to have in our lives, whether it's, that partner that really lights you up and you feel like you can build a life with that you haven't met yet, or the family that you don't have yet, or the career you don't have yet, or the finances you don't have yet. You get the point. We don't have it yet. And it's not just like that's going to happen tomorrow. It might be happening far into the future. And the thing is, imagine being on one side of a cliff and there's this chasm in the middle, there's no bridge, and we're looking to the other side, seeing the thing that we deeply want. And imagine that, like really actually think about that. If you're on one side and this other side of this chasm, this cliff that might be like, it's like a mile in the other direction or half a mile, you can see in the distance the thing that you want. It's right there, but it's just out of reach because I don't have a bridge to get me there. And so many of us are left with that experience when it comes to setting New Year's resolutions for ourselves. And that can actually be quite torturous. I know I was there so much in my life where I knew the thing I wanted, and I was staring at it across the horizon, but there was no way for me to get over there. And that can be a really torturous experience to be in. And then it leaves us usually then feeling immobilized or shut down, like there's nothing I can do to get there. Now, a part of what's going on there is that we don't actually have, and this is just really important to name, we don't have the capacity in our nervous system to hold the life that we're going to have on the other side of this chasm yet. Because the things that you desire in life are going to require things of you that your nervous system might not be accustomed to. And so that means we have to build the capacity in our nervous system to hold that, which can be confusing a lot of times because you can often think the good should just feel good, right? No, the good is not usually going to feel fabulous right away because our nervous system doesn't know what it's like to be in that experience yet, and because that experience has an energetic charge to it. So it's really important to name that, I don't have the capacity to hold what's going to happen in my career a year from now. And the way that I actually get to where I'm going is by beginning to build a bridge across this chasm, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. How do we actually tangibly do that? But I just want to name that for anybody who's feeling like, behind in life, or you're looking at somebody else who has a version of the thing that you want and you notice you feel jealous. By the way, jealousy is a beautiful emotion that clues us into a desire we have. So when you notice yourself being jealous of somebody else, like their family or their career or whatever they have going on for them, and you're just feeling like really angry at them or envious, instead of shaming yourself about that or spending too much time focusing on them, I want that to be like creating a light bulb for you, like, oh, there's something that they experience or they have that I deeply want myself. And then look inside and what is that thing that's on the other side of that chasm? So you can start to actually feel into what your desires are. Now, another thing that I want to name is many of us don't even know what's on the other side of the chasm. We haven't connected into what we deeply desire. And a part of that is because, if our nervous system has had experiences in the past where we were let down, where our desires were not met, it brilliantly says like, well, let's not desire again. Let's not be connected to what you really want or to your truth, because I don't want you to ever have the experience of being let down in that way. So that's another reason why so many of us struggle to even know what we're desiring. And the more that we can regulate our nervous system and come into our embodied experience, and we have other episodes on that, the more we can connect into, what do I want? And by the way, you might even ask yourself that question. And I don't mean like at the other side of that answer is like a list of 15 things all fleshed out of what I want. But it might be, what do I want? I want more connection. I want more rest. I want to laugh more. I want to feel more uninhibited. So just be curious. What is it that you want? And let your body and your nervous system tell you without overthinking it. So for many of us, it's this chasm that keeps us really stuck, unable to step into the things that we are desiring. And then we find ourselves shut down or immobilized. So again, I just want to name that the thing on the other side of this chasm, if it is truly a desire of your soul, that means it's for you. And if soul doesn't work for you, desire of your truest self. A desire of your truest self is something, I say this a lot, something you can't put down. It's almost like it haunts you. It's you can try to distract yourself from it, but it's always lingering. It's always there. And it's not something that is going to give you a false sense or a fleeting sense of love or belonging or connection. Like if I don't feel lovable inside, maybe if I just am successful, I'll be lovable. Those are really different things. Those are things kind of like coping strategies, like things our parts are using or trying to look for to give a sense of enoughness or worthiness. But instead, it's something that's really specific to you. And when you think about doing it, it makes you come alive. Or if you've ever done it before, it makes you come alive. And there's just a yearning for it. That's a soul desire. And I deeply believe that the things that are our truest desires are for us. And it is the work that we do here inside of this space and in this podcast that will support you to get there. And if you're like, but what are the steps to build the bridge? I promise you we're going to get to them in this episode. Before we do that, though, I just want to talk about a few other reasons why we may find that no matter how hard we try, New Year's resolutions just don't stick for us. So another reason why New Year's resolutions don't work is because more often than not, the things that you desire most in your life, those real soul callings or soul desires, they have flavorings of things that were actually unsafe in the past. So for example, if you're deeply desiring to step into your purpose, your life's purpose, maybe it's to start a company of your own, or to create a product, or maybe to change positions where you're working, change roles, etc. That may require things like using your voice, might require taking risks, taking up space, asking for help, and many other things. So remember, our nervous system is a self-protective vehicle, and it has this threat detector called neuroception in your brainstem. And the way that it decides if you're safe or not any moment of your life is by looking to or resourcing the internal database you have that's filled with every lived experience you've ever had in your life, the good, the bad, and the traumatizing things. So as you go out into the world, that threat detector, first line of defense, is always saying, is that safe, dangerous, or life-threatening? Is that safe, dangerous, or life-threatening? And it doesn't look for identical matches, meaning it doesn't have to be exactly like it was in the past. But if it has a flavoring of something that was dangerous in the past, then your nervous system's going to say, I don't think that's safe. We should stay away from it. So if, as I named, stepping into your purpose is going to require you to be seen, known, heard, take up space, use your voice, make mistakes, receive help, the threat detector is going to say, okay, what information do I have on all of that? It looks to the database. And if in the past it wasn't safe to make mistakes, it wasn't safe to take up space, it wasn't safe to use your voice, you get the idea, then your threat detector is going to say, let's not do that. And it's going to avoid the thing that you want the most. And I've done this work with thousands and thousands of people at this point, and I have never not seen it to be true that the deepest desires we have are often the things that our nervous system is saying, I don't know if that's safe. So I say a lot that wherein lies our greatest purpose in life, the things that we want the most, lies our greatest healing. In a way, I think of it's like the universe or this great mystery. It's like dangling a carrot for us. That's the thing you want. And in order to get that carrot, we have to do this work of our own becoming and our own healing and in order to get it. And by the way, healing is not becoming anything. Healing is taking off these layers of protection that we have had to cloak ourselves with in order to survive. And underneath that is who you've always been. And so it's this work that then allows us to arrive at the place we're going. Now, I think of it this way a lot. Oftentimes I talk about our nervous system as a vehicle that you inhabit. And if you're not in the driver's seat of the vehicle, it's like it takes over on cruise control. And imagine in front of you in your life, there are many roads that you could take, right? There's roads towards your purpose and roads towards the relationships you want and roads towards the community you want and all the things you want in life. And then there are these other roads. Those other roads are perhaps roads that your nervous system is saying, I think that's safe because it doesn't require me to take up space. It doesn't require me to use my voice. It doesn't require me to take that many risks. And based in the past, if the past is still happening or the past might happen now, I want to take these safer roads. And so what occurs is our nervous system takes over on cruise control, and it's like it has us go down those roads that it is more certain are actually safe for us than the roads that we actually desire. And here is why so many of us are not living our right life. It is not because those roads aren't available for you to go down towards your right life. It's because your nervous system doesn't yet know that those roads are safe for you to venture down. And if you find yourself consistently like longing for this thing but unable to step towards it, that's likely what's occurring. And in a moment, we're going to talk about what we want to do to change that. But first, I just want to say another reason why we struggle to step into the things we want in each year around New Year's resolutions is because of our parts. We have a lot of episodes on parts and parts work that you can listen to. If you're new to this podcast, I invite you to do that. But I just briefly want to explain it. And I think it's always good to have a refresher on all of this work. So there are many parts or versions of ourselves. We have our truest self, soul self, adult self, if you're using IFS language, internal family systems language. And that's when you're feeling most anchored, present in here, in this moment, and your nervous system thinks you're safe. So when you feel like, if you have moments where you feel like, this is me, This is who I am. You feel anchored, present, capable, able. That's adult you. It's you we're about to be in 2025, if you can believe it. But we also have other parts or versions of ourselves. And so as we go through life, when we experience things that are overwhelming for us, it's as if that part fragments off and they get stuck in that experience, locked in that experience in time. So it's like they're frozen in time in a way. They're still connected to us. Think of it like a string. So they're not totally different personalities. They're a part of us, but they're locked into that experience. And so as we go through life, that threat detector, remember, it's looking out to the world and saying, I don't know, what does this remind me of? What does this remind me of? And let's say you're like me and you had parts that fragmented off that felt like they didn't belong. I had parts like that were made to feel like they didn't belong. Pretty young part of me, and that continued through my whole development. But that part was made to feel othered, that they weren't lovable, they weren't smart, they weren't good enough. Just it was a really intense experience for this young part that began when I was, began when I was born, but really was cemented in early on, let's say 5. When that threat detector looks out into the world and I had experiences where there was other people who were, in connection with each other. Maybe everybody knew each other, but I didn't know anybody. And I came into that environment. They might be really safe, loving people, but to my threat detector, it says, whoa, this is a place where we might not belong. And what was that like in the past? And all of a sudden in that moment, I get triggered and it's like adult me flies out the window and this young 5-year-old me is inhabiting my system. And I'm literally feeling the same woundings that I felt when I was 5. This happens to all of us all the time. And so I would go into situations and all of a sudden I'd find myself shrinking and becoming small and acquiescing and doing the same things I did when I was 5 in order to maintain safety. And I was also feeling those same kinds of feelings that were so overwhelming for me. And so again, all of us are experiencing parts getting triggered or activated. And again, go listen to those episodes on parts work where I actually talk about how to address those parts. But what occurs is that in order for me to navigate life in the world, I develop these protector parts. We all do. And the job of that part is to ensure that 5-year-old is always safe. That protector part never wants that 5-year-old to experience that again. And so what these protectors do is they curate a life that is usually a smaller life than our truest self feels called to. So for example, for me, this protector of that part of me that felt like I didn't belong was like, well, we shouldn't have you out in the world because the world is filled with people who are going to make you feel like you don't belong. So I had a really small life, meaning there weren't a lot of people in my life. I was quite isolated. I just went through the same, habituated patterns every day of like working and then coming home and not really connecting with anyone. I used to call it a beautiful prison that my parts built for me to inhabit. And I called it a beautiful prison. And I actually used those words in my own therapeutic work because I had reached a place like many of us do in our healing work where we now have some safety in our nervous systems and our parts have built this like new house. It's nothing like the house we came from or the past that we were living in. And it's really nice now. But the protective parts are essentially saying like, let's just stay in this beautiful house. Let's not venture out into the world because the world isn't safe. And so many of us are living a smaller life than we actually feel called to. And that's because of these parts of ourselves, these vulnerable parts that are so afraid to feel those things again that they felt in the past. And the protector parts that are dead set and determined to ensure that those parts never have to feel that again. And therein lies so much of the stuckness that we experience in our lives. So I just want to talk, if you're like, oh my gosh, there's so many reasons why we can't step towards the things that we want. Yeah, there are. And I hope that it's not instilling a hopelessness for you, but I hope that it's showing you how much you make sense. If something makes sense, that means there's something we can do about it. So in a moment, we're going to talk about what we can do about it. But the last thing I want to name that really inhibits us from stepping into the New Year's resolutions that we have is a lack of support and connection. Human beings are social creatures. So I said this in a program I was running the other day. where we can do all of the things that regulate our nervous systems. Like, you can eat really well and spend time in nature and remediate your stress and move your body, like all the things we need. You can even be in a purposeful life, like have purpose in your life. But if we don't have safe connection, that's really important here. It's not just any old connection, it's safe connection with other living beings, then we won't be able to thrive, because it's an innate part of the mammalian system, our human mammalian system, to have the need for this in order for us to not only survive, but in order for us to thrive. And when I say safe connection, that means that in that connective experience, that other person has regulation within their nervous system, so they're sending a cue of safety to me. They see and accept me as I am, so they're not asking me, verbally or non-verbally, to be something that I'm not. They celebrate who I am. I feel like I can be all of me with them, even if that feels, and I want to say a caveat to that is, even if that feels scary at first or scary overall. And the hope is that the more that we show ourselves, the safer that it feels. But that's something that we absolutely need. And in order for us to be propelled or springboarded into the life that we want, we have to have this, think of it like a circling of safe connection around us that is the foundation that allows us to then step into the life that we are desiring more fully. And when I say circle around you, I don't want you to think, oh my God, I have to find 50 safe people who I feel attuned with and connected to. No, this could even be one person. And when we are able to connect with them, to share our desires with them, to share our apprehensions about the thing that we're stepping towards, and they stand unwaveringly in their belief in us as a person and their love for us as a person. And by the way, in their love for us beyond our doing. Meaning they might be really happy for us when we step into our purpose, but that isn't the reason they love us. Meaning it is not conditional on our productivity or our success or being good. When we actually have that, it's what allows us to then take risks. It's what allows us to, when our nervous system is saying, I don't know if this is safe, and you're feeling super anxious about going on that first date, that you can call your friend and they can say, they are so lucky, which your friend should say, to be in your presence for the next 2 hours, whether this date works out or not. And I love you and I am right here, and you can text me from the bathroom if you need to. That's a cue of safety. So then my system and my parts, by the way, say, okay, I think I can do this. The only way that I have continued each year to step further into the things that I desire is by having that in my life. And by the way, this started with me with one person, actually with an animal, and then people, building that in my life. And in my work, I can tell you the only way that I have ever been able to step into something that is scary is I have a team of people around me who are incredibly gifted at the things that they do, the work that they do in the world. And they are also incredibly loving people who believe deeply in the calling that I feel in my life and unwaveringly believe in that with me. So even inside, for anyone who has a business, when you're thinking about cultivating a business as a whole and the people that work with you, it's really important that each person holds that with you. The calling that you feel deeply. And by the way, vice versa, you for them. And that springboards us to be able to say, okay, then I think I can do this and I can take risks. And having people in your life, friends and family. Remember, some of my friends said this to me, that they're so excited for the things that I'm doing in my purpose and my work, but that isn't why they love me. And so that means that if it all went away, they wouldn't go away. And all of that, by the way, creates so much healing. As I say this out loud, I think, oh my gosh, and I was just talking about the people that work with me, thinking, oh my gosh, it's like creating the family system we never had for a lot of us, that it wasn't always, it was more conditional for some of us, and as we are wasn't enough. So I know I'm going on and on about this, but it is really important that we have that. And just lastly, on support, it's also really important to think about what kind of support do I need to help me build the bridge to where I want to go. So depending on what I'm working on, in my career, for example, I might hire people, whether that's a specific type of somatic therapist or a coach or a mentor that can really help me facilitate the process of coming into where I'm going. In my relationships, if I want to deepen them, I am most certainly going to be leaning into my somatic practitioners and clinicians to help me in that process. We cannot do it alone. We all need support. So I just want to name that too. It is absolutely imperative. And if you're looking for support here inside of my community, we can link out in the show notes some programs that we have. And there's one that's actually coming up pretty soon. That's a foundation of really all healing, about navigating our nervous system. So you can check that out in the show notes. So let's talk about now, how do we actually build this bridge from where we are, the one side of the cliff, to where we want to be? And again, I hope that everything that I've said so far normalizes for you why you may have found yourself year after year in a dynamic or a repetitive pattern where you aren't actually stepping into the things that you want. It all makes sense. That's why this podcast is called You Make Sense, because it really all does make sense. And it's not happening because you aren't trying hard enough. It's happening because your nervous system and your parts don't yet know that the life that you're desiring is actually safe for you. So let's talk about, how do we change that? What do we do? The first thing that is necessary is taking tolerable steps towards the thing that we want. Now, a tolerable step has two active components to it. The first is that I can complete the step, so I can actually do it. And the second contributing factor is it doesn't feel good. And it's really important to understand this, because sometimes we think, well, as I step towards the thing that I want, well, it should just feel good, right? Because it's the thing I'm wanting. And the moment that we're met with resistance or it doesn't feel good anymore, we can say, oh, maybe I'm not ready for this, or maybe I shouldn't step towards this and I'll revisit it when it feels better. Well, you will wait forever. And that's because your nervous system needs actual data points or evidence that the life you're desiring is safe for you. It does not care about you telling it that that life is actually safe. So we can give ourselves all the pep talks we want. You can sit and do, talk therapy and talk about why the life that you're desiring is safe for you and in whatever aspect of life. And you'll just go round and round and round and round, never taking the step forward, because your nervous system is looking at you saying like, well, I don't think it's safe. You have to show me that it's safe. So if you're finding yourself stuck again and again, not being able to step towards the thing that you want, that means the steps you're trying to take are too big. So what I want you to do is break down that step into, you might even think of it like a micro step. And you might cognitively tell yourself, well, that's a baby step. It's so small. It's not even going to move the needle. It is those tolerable steps that lead you to where you're going. Every single one lays a plank for the bridge that you're building. And it shows, not tells, your nervous system that which it thinks is dangerous is actually safe. Now, a thing that can be really helpful in taking tolerable steps is something I call ventrally bookending. So that means doing something to regulate your nervous system or create a cue of safety before you take the step and then after you take the step. So for me, anytime I'm going to take a step that feels scary, if I can, I usually go for a run. For me, it's a really regulating tool for me. I'll listen to, usually when I'm trying to take a tolerable step, I'll listen to music that's makes me feel spiritually connected and connected to all things and my soul. And then right after that, I take the step. It might be calling a friend and then taking the step. So how can I connect to a cue of safety and then take the step forward? Another thing that's very helpful in taking tolerable steps is I want you to marinate or feel into the thing on the other side of the chasm. So feel into the thing that you're wanting. Let it come alive in your body, like really marinating in it. So as if it's happening now. And years ago, I thought about having a podcast, and I spent a lot of time embodying that and marinating it. And my hope is to eventually turn this into a TV show. And I would marinate in that experience of that happening. And no longer was it a thing that might happen to my body. It was happening. It's real. And the more that you do that, your nervous system begins to build its capacity to hold the thing that you're desiring. So we marinate it. This is real. This is true. And then it's like we shelf it. We put it on a shelf and say, and that thing is not happening today. What's happening today is this tolerable step. That process is vital. Otherwise, what happens is if you marinate in it and then you go to take the step from the place of like, this is happening now, your nervous system's going to put the brakes on and say, that definitely shouldn't happen now. It's too much for me. That happened to me, and I've been writing a book for the last 3 years. It took a lot longer than I expected. And in the beginning, even I, doing this work for almost a decade, found myself, I would marinate in it, and then I was writing from the place of it's happening right now, which honestly to your nervous system could feel like there's a million people reading what you're writing at your desk. That's way too overwhelming, and you won't be able to complete the step. So that marinate and then shelf it and take a tolerable step is really vital. Next thing that is important is consistent regulation of your nervous system. If your nervous system is shaped in a way, we all have something, by the way, called a vagal tone. It means the current shape of your nervous system. And if it's shaped in a way that meaning your nervous system doesn't think that you're safe, so shaped in dysregulation, then it's going to prevent you from stepping into the life that you want. So it's the consistent, what are called neural exercises or moments of regulation that reshape our nervous system. And the result of that is your nervous system begins to see, oh, I actually think you are safe in this world. And the result of that is it's almost like our nervous system moves to our side and it's not blocking us or keeping us from the thing that we want. People ask me a lot like, I don't want to feel anxious anymore. I just want to step towards my purpose. And I feel like it's so human to want a magic pill, like do this one thing and it's going to change your life miraculously. Well, the truth is you can do this one thing again and again and again, and it will change your life miraculously. And that is the tolerable steps or the moments of regulating your nervous system again and again and again. They lead to the life that you're desiring. So 2 last things that I want you to work on this week, this year, as you are stepping into the things that you're wanting, is we must work at the rate of our most apprehensive part. Remember earlier I talked about the different parts within ourselves. We have many, many, many different parts. And again, go listen to the episodes on parts work. But when I say work at the rate of the most apprehensive part, that's the most scared part, the most vulnerable part of you. And that part that's like, oh no, I don't think it's going to be safe. I think something bad's going to happen. I think we're not going to be loved. We're going to be hurt. We're going to be harmed. That are so afraid of the life that you're desiring. And what we do is we take that part's hand lovingly and tenderly, and we validate their experience fully. And we don't try to manipulate them into the life that we want. We don't try to, and certainly what doesn't work is beating them up and saying like, what is wrong with you? Why don't you just step into this life? Well, you're not trying hard enough. Think about if you said that to someone afraid. Do you think that would help them? No, it would make them more dysregulated. But instead, what we have to do, and this gets to the last point, is we must become the competent protector to that most apprehensive part. And that means the protector that they never had. To not only be the person that sees that part and hears that part, but to ferociously protect them. And when we are able to do that, the protective parts that are keeping us stuck, in that beautiful prison I named, they begin to watch that and they're like, wow, there's somebody here who can actually take care of these vulnerable parts. Maybe I don't have to be the one. And that part gets unburdened from their role or their job as we step into being the competent protector. So what I want you to do, again, we have episodes that go really deeply into this work, but I want you to really marinate in what is it like in your body, in your physiology, to feel into being a competent protector. And all you have to do is think about a moment in your life where you were able to protect someone else. Maybe you're a parent or you felt this way with a friend before. It's when you feel like your most adult self, you feel capable and able, you feel steady and sturdy, you feel safe to be big and exposed. And if that feels a little abstract, think of animals, right? A lioness with her cubs. She is both soft and gentle with them, but she's ferociously protective. And that's what allows those cubs to thrive and to grow and to be playful and take risks because they know she will protect them no matter what. And so our parts, they're not going to respond to you just saying, I will protect you. They need to feel that in your body. So feeling and marinating into this protective you can even use an as if tool and think, well, if someone I loved was unsafe or they were exposed to some kind of vulnerability, what would it make me want to do? Feel that in your body, because your parts are listening and they'll begin to see, oh, there's somebody here who can actually protect me. So because that lioness is going to protect those cubs no matter what, it's what allows them to flourish and thrive and be playful and take risks. And so when we become that for ourselves, it's what allows our parts to feel safe enough to allow us to step into the life that we're desiring, instead of them feeling like it's like they're a human shield. They're the ones that are going to be exposed to what could be dangerous to them. It's like we're tucking them away behind us and saying, no, I'm the one that's going to be using my voice in the world. I'm the one that's going to be seen. And I'm the one that's going to ensure that you are safe every step of the way. So the more that we do all four of these things, the more we step by step into the things that we are desiring. And my hope is in listening to this episode that it takes what can be a really abstract thing of New Year's resolutions and of course why they don't work, and make sense of number one, why it doesn't work, and give you the tools that you need to actually create the change. So my hope is that this episode really supports you in understanding why you may have found yourself year after year stuck in a pattern of not being able to bring the things into fruition that you're desiring. And more importantly than that it's equipped you with the tools necessary to actually create the changes that you're desiring. And you can do this one tolerable step at a time. That bridge is beginning to be built, and it will lead you to the life that you're desiring. If you're looking for an affordable way to work with me, there's still time to get on the wait list for my upcoming 6-week course, Navigating Your Nervous System. All teaching and Q&As are taught live. And when you join the wait list by January 5th, you'll get access to $100 off the regular price. All right, everyone. So we have Rachel back with us today for the Q&A portion of this episode. For anyone that's new to our community, I just want to first introduce you to Rachel. Rachel has been on my team for quite some time. She's a social worker. She runs all of the community component to every program that we have. She runs some of those calls. She's on every live call with me. And I think of her as our human connection specialist. And she's an expert in this work, has embodied it herself in her life. And she's on many of these episodes that we do together. So it's good to see you again, Rach. Thank you for being with us today.
Oh, thank you so much. It's really good to be here. And I'm excited for this episode because New Year's Eve has often just been filled full of wanting to change yourself in the next year and having, really high expectations and demands upon ourselves and then falling short. So I'm excited that you're teaching about how to do New Year differently. And we have some really great questions around things that people would normally set New Year's resolutions around. So I'm really excited to hear how you'll address these. So the first one is about money and your nervous system. Could you please elaborate how the state of our nervous system relates to worrying about money, not making enough, feeling guilty and wanting to make more, to afford a nicer house, etc.? And what can I do to change that? Thank you.
So I think it's important to remember we're in a relationship with every single thing in our lives. Everything in our lives, we're having a relationship to, like your cat, the food that you eat, your home, your money that you have, the clothes that you wear, everything we're in relationship with. And remember, polyvagal theory shows us is that our nervous system actually creates our entire experience. There are 3 predominant states of dysregulation in our nervous system. And at any given moment, we may be experiencing one of those 3 states or a state of regulation. But essentially, what I mean by it when I say it creates our whole experience is it creates the thoughts we have, the sensations we experience, the feelings we have, our perception of self, others, and the world around us, and our behaviors. So I think of it like if we were to wear glasses with different lenses, when we have a certain lens on, it's going to shift how we relate to things like money. So if we're in our what's called our sympathetic nervous system, think of that like that would be like a red lens. That's where anxiety, worry, frustration, fear, terror, rage lives. This is really often referred to as fight or flight. It's our state of mobilizing. So our nervous system thinks we're in danger, but it's saying, I think we can do something about this. So when it comes to money, it might be saying, I think we're in danger of not having enough. So from this place, I have to hustle or make sure that I have enough. And so I am constantly or chronically in a place of it never feels quite like enough. And we have a story that when I reach this point or when I have this amount of savings, then I'll be able to relax. But the truth is, if we don't address the underlying dysregulation, we are never going to get to a place where that day comes. And you have the number that you had in your mind, you get it in your bank account, and all of a sudden you raise the bar and it's now a new number. And so again, from our sympathetic nervous system, it's going to be all about the doing or micromanaging or controlling around our finances. So we might find that we really struggle to enjoy the money that we have or spend it at all or, donate or do the things that we might really want to do. We inhibit that because our system is saying, if we don't have enough, we're not going to survive. Like we're going to die. We won't be okay. Or we might notice that we're constantly in that place of I need to earn more. I need to earn more. All of it. And why is that occurring? All of that is happening from an underlying experience internally of I'm not okay. And when that occurs inside, then we have to do things externally to ensure that we are okay. And I want to name, there's many reasons why this may exist. For example, if you grew up in poverty, your nervous system might say, I never want that to happen again. And therefore, here's what we're going to do to ensure that. Or maybe you grew up with, it was tight with your family of origin financially, but needs are always met. But your caregivers talked about money a lot. And maybe they had anxiety around money. So it was always like, there's never enough and there's not going to be enough. And so you have that underlying experience in your own system that's now being translated to your adult life. Now, for others of us, if we're in something called our dorsal vagal complex, that's our state of shutdown. So think of that like maybe a dark blue lens. When we're here, we don't have agency. It's kind of like a bear hibernating. Everything is slowing. I feel like I can't. Everything's impossible. We're disconnecting from our truth, from our needs, from our limits. We are shutting down. You might find yourself feeling exhausted. It's difficult to think. Simple tasks feel impossible. This is where depression, hopelessness, and dissociation all live. So it's really a disconnecting from self in the world. So what does that mean? It means there's often a disconnecting from our finances. So when we're in dorsal, there might be an avoidance of even looking at them. Like I might have this anxiety, but it gets covered up in this experience of disconnection. So I haven't looked at my bank account in 2 months. I just avoid it altogether. Or it feels impossible to even think about doing things that might support me to earn money. Now, others of us might be in something called our state of freeze, which is, think of it like a swirly lens of like a pink and blue swirled together. It's your sympathetic nervous system mixed with your dorsal vagal complex. So that's really I have to do this, but I can't do it. I have to do it, but I can't do it. So it's equal and opposite forces rendering us stuck. So around our finances, we might feel like, I really need to be investing my money, but it feels too overwhelming to do that. Or I really need to look at my bank account, but I can't. Or for some of us, we might earn a bunch of money in sympathetic, like I need all this money. And then all of a sudden we spend all the money and then we're in anxiety again and we have to earn it back and we spend it and we earn it back and we're kind of navigating chaos. The more that we can bring our systems into a place of regulation, where we feel safe inside, that is what allows us to be safe in the world. And so from this place, it's a really different relationship to money. Money is, in many ways, it's an energetic exchange. So from this place, there's a knowingness that in adult me, I'm going to be able to figure it out. Maybe I've always figured it out. Doesn't mean it's been easy. I might have even had times in my life where I didn't have a place to stay, but I found a friend's couch to stay on, or so on and so forth. So from this place of internal safety, there's a knowingness I will be able to navigate what's transpiring. And then the result is our external life can be bumpy and things can move around. Like I have money, a lot of money, and then I don't. And, life circumstances arise, but I can navigate that with greater ease, and it doesn't feel like life or death. I just want to say a caveat to this, of course. In order to have regulation, we need our primary needs met. So if we are in, a financially destitute situation where we cannot buy our family groceries or we cannot pay our bills, the truth of the matter is you can't be regulated in that. And that's a lot of spiritual bypassing happens in that arena where it's like, there's so much abundance in the universe. Yes, and there's also something called poverty. And if we don't have those needs met, your nervous system, rightfully so, is going to say, it's not safe to relax. Yeah, you have had insomnia for the last year because you're barely able to feed your kids, of course. So I just want to name that, that if that is anyone here who is listening, experiencing that, my heart goes out to you. I've been there myself. I understand it deeply. And the more that we are able to create that foundation for ourselves, receiving help from others, from community, from wherever you live in the world, the more that we can actually then gain the internal safety. And I think it's always important to take the time to say that too, because that's a very real experience. And when we can have our primary needs met, we have the ability to then come into regulation and then address everything that I'm saying from that place.
Yeah, that's really important, because otherwise you'll be trying to regulate and think you should be regulated when actually there's a real threat there, and it's not something that can be glazed over.
The only thing we could do is we could disconnect from it and go into shutdown, right? And then just sort of be in that dorsal state of disconnection. The more that we can come into safety, the more that that having all needs met is always enough. And otherwise, it will never be enough.
This next question relates to something that I always used to set New Year's resolutions around, and that was losing weight. And so I'm intrigued to hear what you'll say about this. I'm constantly stuck in the same coping mechanisms, specifically emotional eating. And no matter how many regulating resources I do, I still find myself relying on food. What else can I do to shift this and get out of these habits?
So humans have very strong neural pathways for habituated behavior. And think of a neural pathway like a reflex or like a highway, a groove system in your mind, and then that shows up in behaviors in your body or in thoughts. And so the more that we have taken those habituated patterns, the more of a reflex that it is. Like driving a vehicle, I've driven a vehicle for a very long time. I don't have to think about it anymore. There's such a strong neural network set up for it. Or making my coffee in the morning. I've done that for a long time. Or feeding my dog or whatever. There's strong habituation for it. And so we also all have strong habituation for coping strategies we've used in our lives. And just to refresh, we have previous episodes about coping strategies, but a coping strategy is anything that beautifully supports me to disconnect from the dysregulation I feel in my body that I don't know what to do with. Every single human being has coping strategies that they use. And a part of that is because we don't learn what to do with our dysregulation in our lives or in our early part of our lives. For many of us, we did not have caregivers that knew what to do with their own dysregulation, and we didn't learn it in school. And so the options are to feel anxiety or worry or racing thoughts or frustration or loneliness or sadness or apathy or depression and others, flavorings of dysregulation, or we could cover it up so we don't have to feel it. That's what a coping strategy is. And, there are many. Using food to numb, using sex to numb, alcohol to numb, Instagram to numb, buying geckos to numb. You have not done that, Rachel. You have one gecko, but maybe you could have 10,000 geckos. Buying things to numb, cleaning your house to numb, never being home to numb, dating to numb, exercise to numb. So alcohol, drugs, etc. So none of those things are innately bad, of course, or most of them aren't. It's when we use them as a way to cope that it can then inhibit our ability to actually process what's underneath. But I want us to be kind to ourselves, because if nobody taught us what to do with that, then of course we're going to find ways to cover it up, which is what so many of us have done in our lives. And I've basically used every coping strategy that I just named. I want to also say that social media, which has become quite a big coping strategy for people, in many ways it's meant to be a coping strategy. It's designed to suck you in like a time portal that you could disappear into for 5 hours and not know what you did in those 5 hours or 20 minutes or whatever. And that's disconnecting me from my embodied experience. It's really what a coping strategy is. So all that is to say, we have many coping strategies we've used for long periods of time. And there might be periods in our life where I don't even actually need this coping strategy anymore, but it's so habituated that I just go to use it. For example, like food to numb. And what I want us to really know is that we never want to pull away a coping strategy. We want to replace it. Because if you pull away a coping strategy, like I'm just not going to eat at night, like after dinner, meaning like I'm going to sit and eat and binge eat. I'm just going to stop doing that. If you try to, and that's something I tried to stop doing. I did this for a very long time in my life. I tried to stop. I would tell myself, you're not going to get up and go get that bag of potato chips. And I'd be like watching a TV show or whatever. And everything in my system was saying, no, you have to go do this thing. The reason being is because underneath that was a lot of emotion that felt too overwhelming to be with, like loneliness or sadness or grief or heartache or, anxiety, fear, panic, all of those things. And so my system was saying, no, you need this thing to go to numb, essentially, or to disconnect. And so if you try to just pull away the coping strategy, another one will take its place. And all of a sudden you find yourself online shopping and you're like, how did I just spend $500 on Amazon on, I was going to buy toothpaste. What just happened? Because I was replacing the coping strategy with another coping strategy. Instead, what we want to do is when we notice the impulse to do the thing, like food to cope, we want to pause and say, oh, there must be something underneath that is asking for my attention. And want to see if we can come into our bodies and just be with a tolerable amount of whatever might be there, like feeling sensation in our body. Like, where do I notice that? Or if there's a feeling that could be present, what might that feeling be? If my body could say something to me right now, what might it say? And then we want to engage in one thing that's regulating for us, which might be, I'm going to turn a song on and let my body move this anxiety. And then after that, I can go eat the potato chips. Now, the more that you do this consistently, what you're going to do is you're actually going to get rid of the dysregulation that's underneath the coping strategy. And eventually you'll get to a place where you no longer need those things to cope because there's nothing to cover up. So it's really important to understand that process, to normalize. We all have things that we use to cope, and that there's a way to actually change this that doesn't feel like I'm fighting against this like internal battle, which I felt around food and many other things of I just have to stop doing this. And my system's like, no, you cannot stop doing this because you're going to have to be with this thing underneath it. But when we do the things that I'm naming, it actually relieves us from the dysregulation. And I know you can relate to a lot of that too, Rachel, in your own life.
Yeah, definitely can. And you were right about geckos. I do actually use my gecko as a regulating resource now. I bought him for my son, but actually I'm in love with the gecko, and taming the gecko is a real source of regulation for me. So it's funny that you mentioned that.
Hey, you know what I want to say too, because I made a joke about like geckos could be a coping strategy, meaning like I'm just going to keep buying geckos because it's a way for me to not have to be with my feeling of loneliness. The beautiful thing is when we do this work and transform it, the thing that was a coping strategy and then secondarily caused us pain because now I'm using this coping strategy, it can actually be transformed into a regulating tool. And like you just said about this gecko. So food, if that's something that we have used to cope, the more we heal our relationship to it by addressing the underlying dysregulation, it can actually become a thing that brings connection to ourselves, to the ingredients we're making. And now it's not this thing that is my enemy or something that's caused me to be in a prison, but it's actually something that brings connection.
Well, that's good because I bought myself an advent calendar for the first time in such a long time because I told myself I couldn't eat chocolate every day. And now I have this
Mm.
advent calendar, and eating that small bit of chocolate every day and being really present with it has been really fun. And it's like, oh, nothing bad has happened. It's like repatterning that relationship with food and my body. And yeah, it's just interesting. So it's great to hear that you can transform those coping strategies into regulation.
That's right.
So we've got 2 questions. We get a lot of questions in the communities and via emails about this. So I know there'll be a ton of people who will find this helpful. So the first one is around purpose. How do you know your life's purpose and calling?
Well, so many of us, just to go back to the question that I just answered, so many of us have become disembodied. What does disembodied mean? Simply disconnected from your animal body or your experience. Why would we want that to occur? Well, if we've experienced trauma in the past, and Peter Levine, I say this a lot, but says all the time, we can't go through life unscathed by trauma. So we've all had experiences that overwhelmed our system's capacity to process what was occurring. We were made to feel helpless in that experience, that our beautiful nervous systems say, you know what, get out of this body. Otherwise, you're going to have to be with this experience of terror or panic or loneliness or hopelessness, what feels like forever. Let's definitely not do that. So we learn how to disconnect. And we disconnect by, sometimes there's many ways, but being overly focused on others or the world around me, or overly focused on my parenting or my relationship or my purpose, or I'm in my head all the time. So I'm just in my thoughts all the time. All of those things keep me out of my body. The thing is, your body is your compass. It is where your truth is. It is what informs you of the direction you're meant to go. It is what is where intuition lies, tells you the directions or the paths that are meant for you. And every animal in nature is deeply embodied. You can't really survive in nature, right, if you're disembodied, because how would you be able to track the scent of the animal that you're hunting? Or how would the bird know the direction it needs to fly as the seasons change? They're deeply embodied. And if you asked, by the way, an animal, or if you asked a child who's embodied, if you asked a bird, how do you know the direction it was supposed to fly? It would look at us very confused, like, how do you not know? What do you mean? If you asked a kid who's always been embodied, a question like, do you prefer dance or do you prefer karate? They would just answer. And if I said, well, how did you know that though? Like, what? Did you read some books about karate and decided like that's better for your skeletal system? I don't know, whatever. They would look at me befuddled, right? Like, I don't know what you mean. All I know is that's what I like. And that's because they're so tuned into their embodied experience. And I want to name, it's not just, traumas that disembody us. People also cause us to be disembodied. And this can happen really early on in our lives where we're having an experience and the people around us say, stop that experience or your experience is wrong. So let's say a kid's crying and a parent says, stop crying. Why are you crying? We love you. There's nothing to cry about. Wow, that's very confusing because I feel sad, but you're telling me there's nothing to feel sad about. I must be wrong. Or we have a desire to give someone a hug and they say, no, that's not okay to give them a hug. Or we're told we have to give someone a hug and we don't want to. So all of that disconnects us from our experience. Our truth is not honored and validated. And we're adaptive creatures. So we learn, well, I need to belong to this system, this group of people, in order to be safe. So my truth must be wrong, and I'm going to adapt and take on your truth in order to ensure my safety. So then we get into our adult lives, and for all the reasons I just named, we think about our purpose or the thing we want to do in the world, and we have no idea. And it's because we haven't come back into our bodies yet. So a part of this work is we must begin by showing ourselves our body is a safe place to be. And that's why I say nervous system regulation is the foundation of everything, because the more that we begin to regulate, what occurs is now we can actually be in the place where the answers live. And then and I want you to name here, you don't have to have this like beautifully regulated nervous system in order to come into your truth. We can look for moments of regulation or moments where we feel really present and get curious about what is true for me in this moment. Too often I see people approach their purpose and they think they need to have it all figured out today. None of us have it all figured out today. I don't. That's the mystery of life. Like I have no idea what's going to happen next year. I have some ideas and things I'd like to occur, but I don't know. All I know is I feel into the desires inside of me and I take a step towards them. And then I notice what happens in my body as I take a step towards it. So what we want to do is connect into, in this moment, when I'm regulated, in this moment, few questions I want you to ask yourself. What's true? And it might be as simple as like, I'm thirsty. I want to go outside. I don't love this work I do. And then we want to get curious about that. Okay, what about it don't I love? So, and feeling that in your body with every inquiry that you ask. Another thing I invite in is, if I could follow the impulse of my body in this moment, what would it be? It's going to clue you into this internal listening, which might be like, I actually really want to lay on the ground and stretch my back. And so instead of inhibiting it, I'm going to do the thing. So all of this gets us primed to be in our body. And then I think about, the last thing I want to say is, I think about it this way. Imagine you were fostering a child maybe that was neglected and they didn't get to try any of the activities or join the clubs or the things that a lot of kids are able to do with their caregivers. So if you sat a kid down and said, who wasn't able to do any of those things, and you said, okay, so what do you want to do? Do you want to be in chorus? Do you want to take ballet? Do you want to do the drawing class? Do you want to, just listed all these things cognitively? They'd look at you like a deer in headlights and like, I don't know. Well, of course they can't know. How do we know? By embodying it. And so we want to have that same intention with ourselves. Like, how could I know until I try? And so I think of it like this fun game we are playing with ourselves of, I'm going to explore life and there is no wrong road. Every road is leading to me where I'm supposed to go. So I'm going to try this one thing. And as I try this thing, I'm going to notice what I feel. Like, does it make my soul sing? Does it light me up? Do I feel more energized? That might be a puzzle piece or a clue of where I'm meant to go. And so I don't mean try a whole career out. I mean, I don't know, go take a pottery class and feel what it feels like to work with your hands. Do you like that? Do you not like that? Join this, go to a book club. And what is it like to be in connection with others? How does that feel for you? Do you like engaging creatively? Do you feel like you really like being alone doing your work? And so on and so forth. These are all clues that are going to guide us towards the thing that we are here to do, that not only brings our truest self or our soul self into full alignment, but also heals the world in the process.
Yeah, great. And so once people have realized what they'd like to do with their purpose, often stepping into that can then bring up a lot of dysregulation too. And this question speaks to that. So every year I set goals for myself that I want to grow my business and take on more clients. But it's hard for me to talk about myself on social media. Sometimes I manage to do it for a couple of days, but then I just drop off. I just feel like there are other people out there who are better at this or more experienced than me. I'd love any advice you have. Thank you.
So none of us have the ability to hold the experience that we are going to be living a year from now or 5 years from now. It takes capacity building in our nervous systems to be able to hold that. So I just want to name that for anybody who feels like, oh, I'm behind in life, or I'm not, doing the things that I really want to be doing. I certainly don't have the capacity to hold the life I'm going to have 5 years from now. And certainly you don't either, Rachel. None of us do. And it's these incremental steps that we take that show our nervous system and our parts that it's actually safe to be seen more. It's actually safe to use our voice more. It's actually safe to take up space more. I even think about you, Rach, when you came into work inside of our company, you've grown in terms of your visibility over time. Like when Rachel started with me, she wasn't running calls like she does inside of a lot of our programs now. She wasn't responding back to every single message that all of you send us on Instagram. She wasn't in, every single call that we do. And she certainly wasn't doing this podcast with me. So I'm just curious, Rachel, could you maybe explain for people, in your experience of joining our company in this role, if you would have started out straight out the gate, doing all the things that you're now doing, what do you think that would have been like versus how it happened incrementally?
Yeah, I think that would have been too overwhelming. It would have been a lot, Yeah, it really would. Being able to come into the community space and get to know people, get to know the people that come into the programs. It's been a very gradual process. Yeah.
And, I'll say this for myself, but I'd love to hear your experience of it. The truth of the matter is, every time we step into a new thing, or that requires greater exposure, or using our voice more, or being seen more, we're going to be met with parts of ourselves and our nervous system that says, wait, are you sure that's okay? And what that looks like is, oh, I'm having a little more anxiety all of a sudden, or I feel kind of overwhelmed or stressed out, or even a little fuzzy and out of it. And that's our system saying, you're asking us to embody something new that I don't yet know is safe or not. And so for me, every time I step into something new, I can guarantee it's not just going to feel lovely. It's also going to feel scary. It's going to feel sometimes terrifying. And the more we can take our nervous system's hand and those parts of our hands and say, you know what, this is really normal. It doesn't mean we're going in the wrong direction. It actually means we're going in the right direction. And the more we do this, the better it feels. So I'm curious, can you relate to that for yourself too?
Yeah, so much. And the thing that's popping into my mind is this time last year, I bought a new car, and I had my old car for a really long time. And I bought a really nice car this time that was luxurious for me. And I was in the showroom and I was really excited about it and I felt great. And then once I'd got it home, I literally was dysregulated for 3 days. I wanted to take it back. I felt anxious driving it. It was awful. And then, give it a week and now a year on, I love it. It's so regulating to drive and I feel great doing it. But those new things that we want to step into don't feel great. And I think that's such an important thing to know, because often I know in my journey, I've thought that if it doesn't feel great, then it's not for me and I shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah. That's right.
And even being on the podcast, it's a tolerable step for me. And I've used all the tools that you teach in the programs of ventral bookending and regulating. And that's what allows me to take the tolerable steps and make them tolerable, because I've done things in the past too soon and then gone into shutdown and not been able to go near them for a long time. So it's finding something that's manageable with the tools.
And thank you for saying that. That gets to the second thing I wanted to say in regards to this question, is that we want to make sure that the steps that we're taking in our purpose, for example, are within our capacity and toleration. And this is like an art that we're beginning to learn. You're not going to get it all right at first. We have to try things out to see what is within our capacity. So what I mean by that is this: if this person is saying, it's so scary to be seen or to ask, to put myself out there in that I'm let's say starting a new program or looking for new clients, that we want to see, okay, what is a step that I can complete, but it doesn't overwhelm me? And so the more that we can break down those steps into more tolerable steps, the more our system won't then sabotage us, which is just self-protection, and then bring us back to where, to our starting point where we began. So what we want to do is take that step, anticipate the dysregulation, and then we want to regulate after and show our systems, see, I'm okay. Nothing bad happened. This is safe. And then we go take the same kind of step again. We don't just then go to this, huge step. Another step that feels tolerable. And the other thing I want to name is it's really important that we create conditions around us that are really supportive as we're doing this. So the more that you can connect into, let's say, community or a mentor that is really supporting and saying, I've got you, I believe in you, a friend, a partner, who believes in you deeply or is supporting you, that also creates the connection container that we need to continue to take steps forward. That's something that's, I think, overlooked so much of the time. And stepping into purpose, we can think like, I just need to be determined and take the steps forward. But part of the fuel that allows that determination to thrive and for us to step towards the things that we want is that we're deeply held by others. And there's a deep belief in us and also a deep care for us as a human being beyond our accomplishments. And that's really important too, that even if this goes wrong, that people around me, that doesn't change the way that they feel about me or the way that they can see me as gifted just because something doesn't go exactly the way that I planned for it to go. So having all of those things really prevents us from being in that place of I make momentum, I stop, I make momentum forward and I stop.
I love that. And taking your own hand and expecting to be dysregulated and nurturing yourself around that. Yeah. And having people who love and care for you to, support you. Yeah. It's really beautiful, Sarah.
Thank you. And thanks for being here with us today, Rach.
Yeah. Thank you too. And it's New Year's Eve. So, just sending lots of love and support and care and kindness to everyone in the community.
And a reminder to everybody that truly, if you're struggling to step into the life that you want, all the things that you want, to feel good in your body, to have the relationships you want, to just feel like you in the world and being your purpose, all the things that you're desiring, and you're thinking back on years past, like, oh, they haven't happened fully yet. I really want you to know that's not because they're impossible. It's not because there's something wrong with you. It's not because you're not trying hard enough. More often than not, one of the primary reasons for it is just simply because our nervous system doesn't yet know that that life is safe for us. So when we can take our nervous system by the hand and say, hey, let me show you that I'm safe, what occurs is your nervous system can rest and you can become free. And that's the work we do inside of all of our programs. And that's the work we'll continue to support people to do in this coming year on the podcast too.